All right, this is TC39-TG3, the Security Task Group, meeting on May 22nd, 2024. We are joined by Guy Bedford to talk about source phase imports, continuation of the discussion from the previous week.
Yeah, so I just wanted to give a brief update. It doesn't have to be too long, but we'll see how the discussion goes. On the discussion that we had last week, where I presented the current design and specification that we have for the ASM source phase, and we discussed through a lot of the overall shape of the proposal and the design decisions. There was one specific there were two specific discussions we had to defer, and the one was working out the exact structure of the reflection. So for a JavaScript source, one of the features that we can offer is the ability to inspect the module imports and exports on that source through the source object that we're exposing for the source phase for the JavaScript sources. And the discussion around Agaric's existing bindings implementation, it's currently so the existing bindings implementation that Agaric has some differences from the bindings implementation that we're presenting, and so we're just working through some of the design differences there and the constraints with that. And then there was another case that came up as well, which is the handling of these objects between realms. And the main discussion, though, that would be good to dive into today would be the bindings design. There was rough agreement on the existing imports design, but the problem was specifically when it comes to the exports bindings, because we're trying to create something that's going to work for both WebAssembly and JavaScript, designing an exports API that will expose the right information in a way that can work for both module formats is a different design goal to the one that the existing compartments bindings reflection exposes. So I can send some links to the existing compartments analysis bindings, which is, I believe, based on Modible's design. And then the design that we have currently for source phase imports, or I can just share my screen, actually. Let me just get that going. So we currently just have the imports exposed, and we didn't have anything for the exports, where you can get the list of exports of the module as well as the phase that they were imported in. There's also this additional import metadata, whether you have a dynamic import in the module, whether there's the usage of import meta in the module, whether there's the usage of top level await in the module. And all of these would exist on abstract module source, which is the base class of both WebAssembly.module instances, as well as for JavaScript modules. The bindings analysis that's used by Agaric is much more tied to the structure of the source text in JavaScript modules, and directly exposes the syntactical nature of the JavaScript bindings. We're trying to find a middle ground here. So if I just jump straight to the proposal that I've got right now, what I've specified is two functions, a named exports function and a star exports function. And the named exports function would return an explicit list of the directly exported names. So it would just be a list of strings in the order in which they're exported. And star exports would then be a list of specifiers which are export star re-exported. And that is enough structure to be able to determine the names exported by a given module when you're doing analysis, but it doesn't contain all the individual binding information that the current compartments static analysis APIs do. So this is an API that we could have work for any type of module without it having to be the syntactical bindings that we have for the source text module record currently. And I wanted to just open that up to discussion to see if that seems like a suitable middle ground for the use case of exports analysis. We did need already certain spec refactorings to be able to achieve this, but whether that gets us close enough to the desired use case, or whether we should be looking at something even closer to the bindings model that's used for compartment bindings. So hopefully it's a step in the right direction, but it would be great to get feedback on for those who are interested in these use cases as well. So does anyone have any sense or feedback on what information is desirable for exports? If this seems sufficient for analysis, certainly if you have module sources and you're writing a loader or a linker and you want to be able to bind those modules together and determine what the exports of each module are, this is the bare minimum information required to determine the named exports for each individual module. The star exports, you can go through those modules and union their named exports with the current named exports to get the full named exports list. So it allows obtaining the full list of exports for any arbitrary module, which enables the use cases of wrapper module construction and loaders. If you want to be able to determine if you can, how to write a wrapper module for a given module. Michael.
Yeah, can you remind me what the behavior is when one of the named exports of a module conflicts with one of the star exports, and also when you have star exports from two different modules and they have conflicting names?
Right. So there is a kind of like case of, I think there's, so the main one is the ambiguous case. So if you've got two modules both exporting the same name and you export star from both of those two modules, that'll throw an ambiguous error, and that'll only happen at instantiation time. So it'll happen as you're instantiating a module, and then it'll throw an error in the module graph. This analysis, like is an extension of the existing algorithm for module namespace construction, where initially the namespace is set up with its list of exports, which may or may not yet be resolvable or ambiguous. And then the errors become sort of instantiation time errors as the modules are instantiated. So in other words, the namespace is constructed with this list of exports. Whether it's observable, I would need to verify in the specification, whether you can observe names that have not yet thrown an ambiguous binding. But yeah, if you wanted to verify those errors in this model, then you would need to write your own algorithm against. But I believe this analysis may be worthwhile. But that's a very good question. I will investigate that and post a follow-up on it.
The thing I was getting at is whether it's whether the information about like ordering between named exports and star exports here is going to be important to preserve. Yeah,
the ordering is not meaningful, because ambiguous errors will always throw, and so order doesn't have any effect.
Okay.
Because there's no sense of hierarchy. If there's any overlap, it's an error.
Okay.
But it does make me wonder if you wanted to verify those error scenarios using analysis that's reading these functions, if you're able to do it in a similar way, or if there is missing binding information. So I'll make sure to follow up on that, because that seems worth checking as well. Yeah, I mean, that's really it. I'm hopeful that this could be sufficient, but I don't want to infer use cases either, or assume reductions. So if anyone has any further feedback, please do follow up on the spec repo. If there's use cases that are not met by this, it would be a lot simpler to specify this model for a module format that works beyond source text module record. The alternative is, if we do want very fine-grained bindings information that's very specific to source text modules, we could move these functions off of abstract module source and actually have functions which are specific to JavaScript module sources, and then have them at a very close bindings level. But yeah, that's the update. I don't think we need to go over it more than that then in this case. For the realms issue, we very briefly discussed it at the end of the last meeting, where the question is, when you take a module source from one realm and you try to import it in another realm. And what we're going to seek to ask there is that we can tackle that as a stage 2 concern for the proposal, because a lot of it is stuff that affects interactions with other specifications, where those other specifications need to first be explored more thoroughly to determine. And the other one is a refactoring of the actual module specification itself to create a realm agnostic source record. Would be one of the prerequisites for allowing module sources to be passed between realms. So that's something we'd like to explore as a stage 2 concern. If there is interest in that discussion, we can also go into that now, but I don't want to go into it without all the context as well. So. Yeah. So if there's no further questions, I will. I'll make one more call. If there's any questions at all about this proposal at any level, I'm happy to answer any further design decision discussions, etc. Yeah. Okay. So in that case, that concludes this item for today.
Great. Thanks, Guy.
Thanks, everyone.
All right. Was there any other topics anyone wanted to discuss today? All right. Hearing nothing, I will stop the recording.